If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. And now, the Sunday address. Before we begin, as usual, I have to start off this video with the usual disclaimer. This is about one of the subjects black people don't handle very well, celebrity. When it comes to subjects such as entertainment, celebrity, music, all of that stuff, especially hip-hop, you got a lot of black folks who have basically created the subculture of anything having to do with black culture has to be a fight, especially if it comes to music. Who's beefing with whom? And people are looking for the lowest common denominator. You're not going to get that from me. So if there's anybody in the comments who's doing that, don't be surprised if your comments wind up disappearing or if you wind up not able to comment at all. Just saying. Now, as we all know, Puff Daddy, Sean P. Diddy Combs, Diddy, D, at this point, the way that he's abbreviating his name, after a while, I think it's soon just going to be, that's going to be his name. But he has been charged with racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transportation for purposes of prostitution. But the way the white media has reported on it, apparently the most salient issue that they found happens to be some reported 1,000 bottles of baby oil. That's the main thing the white media was talking about, 1,000 bottles of baby oil. I'm like, okay, so basically are you charging him with stockpiling too much lubricant or something? It was just so weird, but it just goes to show that especially under white supremacy, there's this constant need to police the sexual behavior of black men, even the ones who are perverts, but still. Now, as far as the whole freak-off thing and all that stuff goes, this seems like the usual fare where the white media wants to make sure prosecutors are putting every little saucy detail that they can out there. It's like, let's go ahead and make sure people know just how wretched this individual is. I'm still waiting to hear about where P. Diddy was running around, beating people, chaining people to walls and such. I'm not saying that that's the only standard for whether or not people were coerced into anything, but the way the white media is talking about him, apparently that's what must have been going on because that's the way that they're going breathlessly about this. And the fact that he has been locked up, basically denied bail, he's in a cage somewhere. They're acting as if basically this guy was a serial killer, if nothing else. But he's a rich and powerful man, we hear. Well, there's plenty of rich and powerful men who get hemmed up all the time by the authorities, and yet they don't get the kind of treatment that he's getting. Well, that is, depending on their skin color, because very recently we also had another rich and powerful man, Michael Jeffries, former executive with Abercrombie and Fitch, along with his partner Matthew Smith and James Jacobson. These guys were also charged with sex trafficking and engaging in interstate prostitution. They've gotten 16 counts in all, by the way. Now, these are gay orgies that were going on here, so there don't seem to be any women involved with these guys' shenanigans. The prosecutors say that the men Jeffries and his buddies were allegedly predating on were required to sign non-disclosure agreements and pay damages if they ever told anyone, including family and friends, what was going on. And what was allegedly going on is that prosecutors say Jeffries and his buddies were coercing young men into attending sex events because they told these young men that this would provide them with modeling opportunities. Though in reality, like Harvey Weinstein and others, this was nothing more than bait to lure these young, financially desperate, aspiring young men into these sexually compromising situations. Jeffrey and his friends would arrange for sex parties. I don't know why they didn't call them freak-offs, because not only were they paying these young men, but they were also having them flued out so they could be at these little events. And according to prosecutors, Jeffries and his pals were either directing people to inject or they were personally injecting some sort of prescription-grade erection-inducing substance. So that's what these guys were doing, and they were doing it to people who were otherwise physically incapable or unwilling. Now, that's the very definition of coercion. And those are good details to include. But my question happens to be, why is it then that we're not hearing anything about that with P. Diddy? Now again, for the people with wax in their ears, I'm not sticking up for P. Diddy. I don't even care about the guy. But the point that I'm trying to make is, if you were talking about sexual coercion, there you go. You get individuals who are getting flued out. And you make sure that you got the entire place completely and thoroughly under your sole control. Not to mention you having people who are told you got to inject yourself with some unknown substance. Just take my word for it, it's not going to harm you. And over their heads, you're hanging the job prospects, career prospects. Oh, this can either be a big leg up for you or it can be the end of the road. Now, that's the definition of sexual coercion, not to mention afterwards, oh, and just in case you guys feel some kind of way about all the stuff that you were made to do, here's some NDAs you better sign. Because that's what happened. Here's some NDAs. You better go ahead and sign it or else. So that's coercion. At least that's what we would always think of, but that's not the way the white media has been reporting on it, at least not as far as these guys are concerned. They've been actually pretty close to the vest with the details. Jeffries and his buddies were smiling as they walked out of court. They got their little bail offered to them. Smiling as they walked out. Yeah, because they know they got the complexion for the protection. There's absolutely nothing you can say about P. Diddy that you can't say about Jeffries and his buddies. In fact, you can actually say a lot more because we actually got some details in this case. But this Abercrombie guy, he's not in jail tonight. He's a free man, released with a smile on his face. All them fake teeth of his. And nobody, absolutely nobody in the white media has pointed out how you got two very wealthy men, both indicted by the feds for the same things, yet they're being treated completely differently. Nobody seems interested in making those comparisons. Times like this, I wonder where Kamal Dumbbell is at. He was so eager to do a phony documentary about Bill Cosby on the false grounds that he was just wanting to discuss wealthy men with power misusing their position. Okay, well, here's a guy who ran one of the largest and most successful clothing retailers in America. And on top of that, this guy's got all these young men who he had signing NDAs, having them flued out and all the rest of this stuff. And Kamal Bell's not asking any questions, but he's not the only one. Though I gotta say, for the people there, usually these shea butter bootlicks, I want you to tell me that Kamal Bell's not a shill for the white media now. Oh yeah, he's just a comedian who felt moved by conscience to go after a high-profile man, just never a white one, because these bootlicking sellouts never do that. They know the rules of racism. They know full well that their white media employers have them on the payroll specifically to be their black face, their black attack dog, whose job it is to go after other black people, so they can give the white racist media cover. They know what their job is, and that's what they do. Now, what we should be getting is a nonstop comparison between P. Diddy and this Abercrombie degenerate. But the two of them are not getting a comparison at all. The coverage of this Abercrombie guy has been rather muted, but then again, isn't it always? The feds went to P. Diddy's properties wearing sneakers. That's what the guys showed up with. The feds showed up. They had assault rifles in tow, because apparently somebody told them this was going to be some sort of high-risk arrest. And I guess they felt that it was so high risk, they could go ahead and wear their tennis shoes. They didn't show up wearing their black boots. They didn't show up guns at the ready, carrying all their gear. As a matter of, they're just doing dress up. Well, somebody told us to bring the assault rifles for the cameras. You can tell that's what happened here. The DOJ is like, we need some good images for the cameras, so make sure you bring all of your gear. What were they expecting? And this is all happening under Joe Biden, mind you. They're sitting here dressed up, assault rifles, as if that can't go wrong. But clearly, even these goofballs with the guns, they knew that there was no threat there. There was no substantive problem. I mean, when you're bringing freaking tennis shoes to a raid, they put on their little green coveralls, and they made sure we're going to have our assault rifles with us, but they're wearing tennis shoes because obviously they know this is not a high-risk anything. This is just performing for the cameras, political theater. But this is what Joe Biden's DOJ is doing. This is what Merrick Garland's DOJ is doing. Can't do anything about all these cops who are murdering black people. And I've been showing you since the very beginning of the Biden administration, the numbers of black people killed by the cops is higher than it was under Trump. And Biden's DOJ isn't doing anything about it. I guess that's why it keeps happening year after year after year. Oh, but when it comes time to go after P. Diddy, they're showing up guns in tow. Oh, they're at the ready for that. Now, as we've learned from the Weinstein fiasco, the white media was very invested in protecting that guy because a disproportionate number of white media executives were themselves doing the same things Weinstein did. When the whole Me Too movement got started, you had a whole bunch of white media executives who were disproportionately represented among the individuals who were being accused and exposed. So every time it was time to go after Weinstein for another charge or time to do another update about Weinstein, he's going back to court for some hearing or other, we would suddenly see the white media become obsessed with some black man and make headlines about them instead. Whether it be R. Kelly, Cuba Gooding Jr., Bill Cosby, he is their favorite perennial piñata. Michael Jackson had been dead for a decade, but that didn't stop them from making a phony documentary, making accusations against him with no evidence, by the way. Nothing but a bunch of rumors, nothing but a bunch of hearsay. Again, I'm no supporter of P. Diddy, same as I was no supporter of Cosby or R. Kelly, but I am a supporter of the truth. And we need to understand that the white powers that be didn't just find out about Diddy's alleged debauchery just this year. They've known about this stuff for the longest time. And they were just putting it away for the right occasion, just like with Tiger Woods. Damian Williams is the U.S. attorney out there who's going after P. Diddy, and he's doing the exact same thing that Kim Fox did when she went after R. Kelly. This Damian Williams character, he is publicly appealing for accusers to come forward. Now, if the feds actually had their ducks in a row, if they actually had a Loctite case, if these guys were convinced that Combs is this deviant that they claim him to be, then why is it that now that they're bringing their charges, they're also saying, if there's anybody else who wants to accuse him of anything, please come forward, because that's what they're doing. Williams ought to already have his case together now. Instead, he's asking if there's any accusers out there and saying that this case is far from over. So what does that mean? You don't need to be stacking the deck like this if you've already got the deck in your favor. Again, it's usually only when they're ever going against a black man. They got a black man who's hemmed up. Now it's like, is there anybody else who wants to accuse him of something? So is this really about presenting a case, or is it more about manufacturing one? Well, we just got to have something that we can get them dragged into court about, and after that, we know that there's going to be a feeding frenzy, because they know exactly how it works. You just go ahead and make sure there's a black man who's getting accused of something, and you'll have a whole bunch of people coming out of the woodwork, and that's deliberate. That's exactly what they're doing. This is the Cosby R. Kelly playbook being run to a T. Prosecutors claim that they got cases ready to go, and yet when they get in front of the cameras, they're suddenly asking for volunteers. Everyone knows that when it comes to black men in particular getting hemmed up, if there's one person who brings an accusation, then everyone gets to jump on the bandwagon. It's intended. It's expected. They're trying to kick off a feeding frenzy. They know that this is going to be red meat for anybody who thinks that they can bring a civil case or anybody who's trying to set one up. Dozens and dozens of accusers are going to come out of the woodwork. I mean, P. Diddy's been out there for 30 plus years. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of females who are probably hoping that they could cash in and they see an opportunity now. You know this is exactly what's going to happen. It's completely and thoroughly predictable. You're going to get an orgy of litigants, pun intended. But then again, when you look what's happening with Michael Jeffries, it's a little bit different, ain't it? Now, over there in the Eastern District of New York, keep in mind, Damian Williams represents the Southern District of New York for the feds, but in the Eastern District where Michael Jeffries has a case brought against him, same city, but different offices. So it's the same justice system, right? Yeah, then why is it then that the U.S. attorney prosecuting Jeffries isn't asking additional victims to come forward? Damian Williams' co-workers over in the Eastern District of New York, they're not deciding, well, let's go ahead and see if we can get some people to come out of the woodwork against this guy. They're not advertising for accusers. Curious that, huh? The principle is always the same. Once the black defendant is charged, refuse bail so that even if he's acquitted, well, at least he had to spend some time behind bars. That's the entire point of doing it. That's the pattern. It's as predictable as night follows day. But this is what's going on here. And again, it doesn't matter if you like P. Diddy or not. I didn't like R. Kelly. Not that crazy about Bill Cosby, truth be told. But the truth of the matter is, you can't tell me that this is equal justice under the law. It's being done for a reason. I would hazard to guess that they probably had a case against Michael Jeffries going long before they suddenly decided to bring P. Diddy in for some charges. If the Weinstein example is anything to go by, they most likely had charges simmering against Jeffries for the longest time. But, as we always know, if you're going to be bringing a white man under charges, you're going to have him under the Klieg lights so you can light him up and say, hey, look at this degenerate over here. You got to make sure that there's a black person being accused of something too. Remember, Damian Williams is over there in the Southern District of New York, and the guy going after Jeffries is in the Eastern District, same town. You think these people don't talk to each other? Don't be naive. Don't be stupid. I've been telling you for the longest time, nothing happens in a vacuum under white supremacy. We got two moguls, practically the same resumes. Mike Jeffries is like 80 years old, and with that crappy plastic surgery he's got in those phony horse teeth of his, he looks every bit of 80. And the way they're being treated by the prosecutors, the courts, and the media, though, is exactly the opposite. Now, this is important because we get hit over the head constantly by the white left and the white right about how the way black people are treated in American society, well, that's about class, not race. That's a money thing, not a color thing. Well, here you have two wealthy perverts, and one of them is being treated like he was only accused of a DUI while the other guy is being treated like he's a mass killer. No, it's not about class. It is about race. Because with Puff Daddy, what we're hearing about is, well, who else was there? Any of the other hip-hop friends were there. Meanwhile, with Michael Jeffries, nobody's asking any questions about who else was there. Yeah, they don't want to know. Because just like with Jeffrey Epstein, we know that if we start looking to see, hey, anybody else who was showing up for these off-the-record modeling sessions with Michael Jeffries and the boys, hey, who else was injecting themselves with Viagra or whatever? Yeah, we probably see a whole bunch of famous names, a bunch of rich and powerful individuals. So that being the case, it's far better to look at this black man over here. See if maybe there was some surprise appearances by Jay-Z or Birdman at one of these freak-offs. That would be much more interesting to them. So understand that. Puff Daddy may well deserve the charges that are being brought against him. We have yet to see the evidence of that, though. All that's been brought against the guy is basically whatever you see in the music videos. Apparently that's how he's living his life for real. And apparently he must also own a hell of a lot of stock in baby oil, because the way that he buys it, I guess he loves it. But none of those things are crimes. The stuff that's been said about Jeffries, though, if this stuff is true, yeah, you can look at this and say, man, you got this guy dead to rights. The stark and undeniable difference between how these two wealthy men are being treated for the exact same charges, that tells you everything you need to know. It makes all the sense in the world that it's a former executive from Abercrombie and Fitch who's being given this special treatment, because when it comes to America, a racial double standard is always in fashion. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Suleiman Alaji, Radia Bey, Charles Hairston, Leonard Cottingham, and Tyrone Jones. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.